The first shot across the bow arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a cable bill and a coupon mailer. It wasn't just an email or a flimsy photocopy. This was a heavyweight, linen texture paper that felt important, the kind you'd use for a wedding invitation or a cease and desist. The return address, embossed with the Whispering Pines seal. A majestic pine tree that I'm pretty sure Beverly had trademarked in her own name. Made my stomach do a little flip. We'd lived here for 3 peaceful years, and this was our first official correspondence from the Standards Committee. My wife, Sarah, saw me holding it and joked, "Ooh, maybe we won Suburbanite of the Month. I should have been so lucky." I slid my thumb under the flap, tearing through the expensive paper, and unfolded the single, crisply typed page. My eyes scanned past the formalities and landed on the heart of the matter. Unapproved lawn ornament, hereinafter referred to as the gnome. I actually snorted. I looked out our front window at Norman, his cheerful, chubby-faced smile beaming from beside the geraniums. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had painstakingly painted his blue hat in art class. He was a symbol of pure, unadulterated joy. And according to this letter, he was a violation of Covenant 12 Section C. A blight upon the community's aesthetic of subdued elegance. The phrase $50 per day jumped out at me, followed by a genuine sense of bewilderment. Who was this offended by a gnome? Did his unsubdued elegance keep someone awake at night? I showed the letter to Sarah, who rolled her eyes so hard I feared for her optic nerves. "Just call them," she said, ever the pragmatist. "It's obviously a mistake. No sane person could have a problem with Norman. Oh, my sweet summer child." I dialed the number with a sigh, fully expecting to share a laugh with some bored admin about the mix-up. I had no idea I was about to declare war in the most passive-aggressive conflict of my life. The phone was answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by it, poised to strike. Beverly Hopkins. The voice was like ice clinking in a glass, brittle, cold, and suggesting I was already wasting her time. I put on my friendliest, most reasonable tone. "Hi, Beverly. It's Alex from 1428 Maple Creek. I just got your letter about the garden gnome." "The violation, yes," she corrected, her emphasis turning the word into a moral transgression. I could almost see her pursed lips through the phone. "Right, well, it's just a little gnome my daughter loves. It's completely harmless. Surely this falls under a de minimis kind of thing? It's not a rusted-out car on blocks." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Mr. Alex, in Whispering Pines, rules are not suggestions. They are the framework that protects our property values and our shared vision. Subdued elegance is not open to interpretation. It is a standard. Your figurine," she said the word like it was a synonym for biohazard, "is a garish, unapproved eyesore. You will remove it." The sheer authority in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't a discussion. It was a decree. The slow burn in my chest ignited a little brighter. "And if I don't?" I asked, more to gauge the depth of her obsession than anything. "The fines will accrue. $50 today, another 50 tomorrow," she stated, her voice dripping with relish. "We can and we will escalate to placing a lien on your property. We do not tolerate noncompliance in Whispering Pines. It sets a bad precedent. Are we clear?" It was clearer than my freshly power-washed, HOA-mandated driveway. The message was simple: conform or be financially bludgeoned into conformity. I muttered a non-committal "yeah, Crystal," and hung up, staring at Norman's cheerful, painted eyes. This was no longer about a gnome. This was about a woman who confused a tiny position of power with absolute sovereignty, and I had just become her dissident. The initial white-hot urge was to do something magnificently petty. To paint the gnome in beige camo or mount a miniature protest sign in his little ceramic hands. But I've seen enough courtroom dramas to know you never show your hand early. Instead, I took a deep breath, moved Norman to a spot behind the azalea bush in the fenced-in backyard, a domain even Beverly's tyranny couldn't yet reach, and consoled a heartbroken Lily with the promise of a double-scoop ice cream later. The retreat stung my pride, but it was tactical. It bought me time. The ceasefire lasted exactly 1 week. The next envelope was a masterpiece of absurdity, citing my mailbox for being 3.2 shades too dark and navy blue. They included a Pantone color swatch for Whispering Pines Approved Midnight. I held it up against my mailbox in the bright sunlight. They were identical. It was then I knew I wasn't dealing with a reasonable authority, but a system gaslighting itself into relevance. The following week it was my grass, a heterogeneous shade of green, due to some entirely normal variation in sunlight. My welcome mat was next, deemed excessively patterned. It was Mr. Henderson, my retired neighbor, who finally gave me the final push. Catching me scowling at the latest citation, he shuffled over. "She's got it out for you, son," he murmured, keeping his voice low as if the hedges had ears. "You showed spirit by calling. She can't have that. It's like a crack in her perfect, beige dam. Now she has to prove she can still plug the leak." He nodded sagely. "You don't fight a wasp by swatting at the nest. You find the queen." That was it. That was the moment. I went inside, fired up my laptop, and found the county registry. I downloaded the full 120-page PDF of the Whispering Pines CC and RS. I printed the whole thing, the stack of paper feeling like a weapon in its own right. That night, with a highlighter in one hand and a strong cup of coffee in the other, I began my descent into the rabbit hole. I was no longer just a homeowner. I was an archaeologist, digging for the one fossil that could bring down the dinosaur. The CC and RS became my bedtime reading, a dense tapestry of legalese and bizarre specifications. I learned that fence spikes could be no sharper than a standard pencil tip, and that the acceptable decibel level for a weekend lawnmower was precisely 65 dB. I actually went out and measured mine just in case. It was 62.3. Try and find me now, Beverly. But I wasn't just looking for defenses. I was hunting for offenses. The game had changed. I needed to find what they were afraid of. That's when I stumbled upon Article 7, Section 4, Financial Transparency and Conflict of Interest. It stated that any expenditure over $500 required 2 competitive bids and full board approval. A little cross-referencing with the publicly available annual budget summary showed a $5,000 payment to Hopkins Landscaping for common area maintenance that was never put to a vote. A quick search revealed Hopkins Landscaping was owned by Beverly's brother-in-law. Bingo. One violation, nice and tidy. But the real jackpot was found not in the financials but on Google Earth. Zooming in on Beverly's property, behind the perfectly manicured gazebo, was a distinct gray-roofed structure, a shed. Cross-referencing with the architectural guidelines, any structure over 64 square feet required formal approval. I used the measurement tool, 120 square feet, and there was no record of its approval in the meeting minutes. I had her. It was a beautiful, unpermitted eyesore. I was compiling this beautiful dossier when the new letter arrived. This one was different. It wasn't a fine. It was a shakedown. They wanted Parcel 7, my grandfather's land, my sanctuary. Their offer was so insultingly low it was laughable. But the last line wasn't a joke. "We can compel the sale for the community's benefit." My blood ran cold. This was no longer about gnomes or grass. They were coming for my inheritance. My no wasn't just a refusal. It was a declaration of war, and I had just found my first batch of ammunition. My refusal was a declaration of war, and Beverly's response was a full-scale bombardment. The fines, once comical, became a daily deluge of malicious creativity. I was cited for unapproved shadow patterns cast by my maple tree in the evening. Another letter complained of excessive ambient noise from residents' backyard, which was me and Lily laughing while blowing bubbles. The pettiness was a weapon, designed to exhaust and bankrupt me into submission. I started taking time-stamped photos and videos of everything, building a digital fortress of evidence. My Beverly file was growing fat with her own absurdity. I was finalizing my presentation for the next board meeting, my slides a beautiful tapestry of her shed, the shady landscaping payments, and the threatening language about my land. I was ready to go nuclear. Then, at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, my phone shattered the silence. It was the county sheriff's department. My cabin was on fire. The drive to Parcel 7 was a blur. The smell of smoke hit me a mile away. When I arrived, the scene was something out of a nightmare. The old pine cabin, filled with memories of my grandfather, was a skeletal framework glowing against the night sky. The heat was immense. The fire chief, his face grimed with soot, put a hand on my shoulder. "We found pore patterns near the foundation," he said, his voice low. "They used an accelerant. This wasn't an accident, son. This was arson." I stood there, watching the embers of my history float into the sky. The shock was a physical blow, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, clarifying certainty. This was no coincidence. This was the final catastrophic escalation. Beverly's campaign of petty tyranny had just crossed into a felony. And as I stared into the ashes, any thought of a simple, procedural takedown at a board meeting evaporated. This was no longer about winning. It was about justice. The community clubhouse was packed, a sea of folding chairs and simmering resentment. You could smell the tension, a mix of cheap coffee and bottled-up fury. Beverly sat at the head table, flanked by her sycophantic board, looking imperious as she gavelled the meeting to order. She breezed through the minutes, then moved to new business. A fervent debate on banning pink flamingos, which she called gateway ornaments to visual anarchy. I just sat there, my laptop bag at my feet, my heart thumping a steady, determined rhythm. When she finally opened the floor for comments, I was the first to stand. The room went quiet. "Beverly," I began, my voice deceptively calm. "Before we legislate against plastic waterfowl, I have a few questions about the actual rules. Starting with the budget you said was available for review." Her smile was thin and condescending. "Of course, transparency is a pillar of this board." "Is it?" I asked, walking to the projector I'd set up earlier. I plugged in my laptop and the screen lit up. Her smile tightened. "Let's start with a simple property standards issue." I clicked, and a crisp satellite image of her backyard filled the wall. I circled the shed with a laser pointer. "Can you explain this unpermitted 120 square foot structure? Violation of Covenant 15, Section A. The fine is $100 per day. By my math, that's over $100,000 in unpaid fines you owe the HOA." The room erupted. Beverly's face went from smug to ashen. "That is a temporary, permanent shed," I interrupted, clicking to the next slide. The budget line for Hopkins Landscaping, highlighted in yellow. Now, this $5,000 payment to a board member's relative, without competitive bids, a clear breach of fiduciary bylaw 4. That's not transparency. That's embezzlement. The murmurs grew into angry mutters. I saved the best for last. The slide showing the $85,000 meditation garden budget next to her $15,000 offer to me. "You tried to steal my land," I stated flatly. The gasps were audible. And when I said no, I paused, letting the silence stretch, my eyes locked on hers. It burned to the ground. The fire chief confirmed it was arson. I looked out at the horrified crowd. "He's in the back of the room tonight, if anyone has information." Beverly looked like she was going to be sick. The dam had broken, and her perfect, beige empire was washing away. The silence that followed my statement was the most profound sound I have ever heard. A vacuum of shock, swiftly filled by a rising tide of furious whispers. I saw it in their eyes. The spell was broken. Beverly wasn't a leader. She was a fraud wearing a beige pantsuit. The gavel in her hand, which had once commanded fear, now looked like a pathetic toy. She tried to speak, to gavel the room into submission, but her voice was drowned out by a chorus of shouted questions and accusations. "What about my hospice ramp?" Mr. Henderson bellowed, his voice cracking with years of suppressed anger. "You fined me for a ramp my dying wife needed." Another neighbor stood, waving a sheaf of papers. "And these legal fees? Is your cousin getting rich off our dues?" It was a rebellion. The dam of fear and conformity that Beverly had spent years building had finally, catastrophically, burst. The fire chief, a stoic presence in the back, simply nodded at me, and that small gesture spoke volumes. The investigation was already moving. Within days, the pieces fell apart with stunning speed. The police, armed with the financial records I'd provided and the chief's arson report, paid a visit to Beverly's nephew. He was a weak link, and he broke almost immediately, confessing that his aunt had promised him $5,000 from the HOA's slush fund to make the problem go away. Her arrest followed solicitation of arson, fraud, embezzlement. The local news ate it up. HOA president accused of torching cabin in zoning dispute was a headline that wrote itself. A special election was a formality. We voted in a new board led by a revitalized Mr. Henderson, whose first act was to hire a forensic accountant. The goal, to track down every cent Beverly and her cronies had misappropriated and claw it back. The reign of terror was over, replaced by the tedious, hopeful work of rebuilding something actually meant to serve the community. The first official meeting of the Henderson administration felt more like a block party than a bureaucratic proceeding. There was laughter, there was actual constructive debate, and there was a unanimous vote to strike the words "subdued elegance" from the covenants entirely. We replaced the entire architectural guideline with a simple, sane principle. If it's not a safety hazard or a genuine nuisance, it's probably fine. The new Norman clause specifically protects decorative lawn ornaments under 4 feet tall. The feeling in the room was one of collective liberation, as if we'd all been holding our breath for years and could finally exhale. As for my property, the insurance payout and the subsequent civil suit against Beverly, who is now trading her beige cardigans for prison orange, meant I could rebuild. But I didn't just want a cabin for myself. I wanted a monument to the pettiness we'd overcome. So, we built the Maple Creek Retreat, a cozy 2-bedroom cabin with a fire pit and a dedicated fishing dock. And for its grand opening, we threw a community-wide barbecue. The irony was thicker than the smoke from the grill. The very land Beverly tried to steal for her meditation garden was now a vibrant, laughing, slightly chaotic community hub where kids played tag and neighbors actually talked to each other. And standing guard by the new porch, freshly repainted with a slightly more vibrant blue hat, was Norman the Guardian. He's been officially promoted to the resort's mascot, a permanent, unsubdued reminder that sometimes you have to fight for the right to a little bit of joy. Seeing him there, watching over the community that Beverly tried to suffocate, was the most deeply satisfying "I told you so" I will ever experience. Justice, it turns out, tastes an awful lot like grilled burgers and slightly burnt marshmallows.